Welcome to this fascinating journey into the world of Echinodermata. Imagine walking on a beach and finding a dried, star-shaped shell. You might wonder how such a rigid, brainless creature survives in the harsh, dynamic ocean. Today, we are going to explore these incredible animals, understand how their unique bodies are built like living hydraulic machines, and learn how they are classified into different groups. By the end of this lesson, you will see sea stars and sea urchins not just as beach decorations, but as brilliant engineering marvels of the natural world. Let us dive in. To begin our exploration, let us define what echinoderms actually are. The name comes from the Greek words echinos, meaning spiny, and derma, meaning skin. These creatures are exclusively marine, coelomate invertebrates, characterized by a spiny, calcareous endoskeleton. As adults, they exhibit a very specific type of body plan called pentaradial symmetry, meaning their body parts are arranged in fives, or multiples of five, around a central axis. However, their larvae are bilaterally symmetrical. This is a crucial evolutionary clue, indicating that they evolved from bilateral ancestors, making their radial adult form a specialized adaptation rather than a primitive trait. Now that we know what they are, you might ask why we need to study these creatures so deeply. First, they are deuterostomes, meaning their embryonic development is remarkably similar to ours, making them our closest invertebrate relatives. Studying their embryology provides invaluable insights into human cellular biology. Ecologically, they play a monumental role in maintaining the balance of our oceans. Sea stars are considered keystone species because they control the population of mussels. Without them, mussels would destroy local biodiversity. Similarly, sea urchins graze on kelp, and their populations must be balanced to prevent the destruction of entire kelp forests. Understanding their ecological role leads us to appreciate how their bodies are built for survival. Their survival relies heavily on the geometry of their radial symmetry. This formula tells us exactly how the animal's body is divided in space. Theta represents the angle in degrees between each identical body segment or arm. The variable n represents the total number of symmetrical segments or arms the animal possesses. The number 360 represents a full circle around the central axis of the animal's body. As the number of arms increases, the angle between them decreases, meaning the arms are packed more closely together around the central disc. Let us see this geometric principle in action with a concrete example. We want to compare a standard sea star with 5 arms to a specialized species known as the sunflower sea star, which can have up to 24 arms. We substitute the number of arms for each species into the denominator of our formula. For the standard sea star, dividing 360 by 5 gives us exactly 72 degrees. For the sunflower sea star, dividing 360 by 24 yields an angle of 15 degrees. Physically, this means the sunflower sea star's arms are packed very tightly together, giving it a more circular, disc-like appearance that allows it to glide rapidly. Having explored their geometry, we must now look at the internal machinery that drives them. Instead of muscles pulling on bones like we have, echinoderms use a complex network of internal water pipes known as the water vascular system. This system allows them to move, hunt, and cling to rocks. Think of echinoderms as living, breathing hydraulic machines. They pump ocean water through their bodies to extend and retract hundreds of tiny tube feet. This unique adaptation allows them to exert continuous, tireless force, which is essential for prying open the shells of their prey without experiencing muscle fatigue. To truly grasp how this hydraulic machinery works, let us examine this detailed diagram of a sea star's water vascular system. Notice the madreporite on the upper surface? This acts as the water intake valve, filtering ocean water into the system. The water flows down into the ring canal in the center, which then distributes it outward into the radial canals running down each arm. Along these canals, you can see the bulb-like ampullae connected to the tube feet. When the ampullae contract, they force water into the tube feet, extending them outward. This brilliant plumbing system is the secret behind their incredible strength and mobility. Now that we have visualized the water vascular system, let us look at the physics that governs its power. The gripping strength of a tube foot is directly proportional to how hard the animal can pump water into it and how wide the sucker is. In this formula, F represents the mechanical force exerted by a single tube foot, measured in newtons. P stands for the internal hydrostatic pressure generated by the water vascular system, measured in pascals. Finally, A represents the surface area of the sucker at the end of the tube foot, measured in square meters. If the internal pressure increases, the gripping force becomes stronger, allowing the sea star to pry open stubborn clamshells. Let us apply this physics formula to a real-world hunting scenario. A sea star is trying to pry open a clamshell. We are given that the water vascular system generates a pressure of 2,000 pascals, and each tube foot has a sucker area of 0.00005 square meters. We need to find the force exerted by just one of these tube feet. We substitute the given pressure and area into our equation. Multiplying 2,000 by 0.00005 gives us 0.1 newtons. This tells us that a single tiny tube foot generates a small but measurable pulling force using just water pressure. Knowing the force of a single tube foot brings us to an important realization about how sea stars hunt. A force of 0.1 newtons is not enough to open a clam. We must establish the cumulative power of the sea star. To do this, we set up an equation for the total force, which is the number of engaged tube feet multiplied by the force of a single tube foot. The sea star attaches 100 tube feet to the shell. By substituting 100 for N and 0.1 newtons for the single foot force, we prepare to aggregate these tiny individual forces into one massive coordinated pull. Continuing from our setup, we now calculate the final aggregated force. Multiplying 100 by 0.1 yields a total pulling force of 10 newtons. This mathematical result is profound. 10 newtons is roughly equivalent to lifting a 1 kilogram weight. This perfectly illustrates the intuition behind their hunting strategy. Echinoderms use the cumulative power of hundreds of tiny hydraulic suckers to overcome the strong muscles of a clam. We have just proven mathematically that their unique water vascular system is an incredibly effective evolutionary tool, allowing a brainless creature to overpower complex prey. Now that we understand the physics behind their movement, we can look at how scientists categorize them into 5 distinct classes, starting with class Asteroidea. This class includes the classic sea stars, or starfish. These animals typically have a central disc that seamlessly merges into 5 or more tapering arms. Their mouth is located on the underside, while the anus and the water intake valve are on the top. They are active predators, using the powerful hydraulic tube feet we just calculated to pry open bivalves. Interestingly, they have a bizarre feeding mechanism where they extrude their stomach out of their mouth to digest their prey externally before pulling the liquefied food back inside. Moving on from the classic sea stars, we encounter class Ophiuroidea, which consists of the brittle stars and basket stars. Unlike sea stars, brittle stars have a very distinct, sharply defined central disk with long, slender, and highly flexible arms attached to it. They do not use their tube feet for locomotion. Instead, they move by whipping their long arms in a snake-like motion, which makes them the fastest moving of all echinoderms. Their tube feet lack suckers and are primarily used for feeding and sensing their environment. Furthermore, they lack an anus, meaning all waste must be expelled back through the mouth. Our third group, class Echinoidea, takes the echinoderm body plan in a completely different direction. This class includes the sea urchins and sand dollars. These creatures have completely lost their arms. Instead, their bodies are enclosed in a rigid, globular, or flattened shell called a test, made of fused calcareous plates. They are covered in movable spines that they use for protection and locomotion. Sea urchins possess a highly complex, specialized chewing apparatus called Aristotle's lantern, which they use to scrape algae off rocks. Their tube feet extend through tiny pores in their rigid test, allowing them to anchor themselves against strong ocean currents. Next, we have class Holothuroidea, comprising the sea cucumbers, which look drastically different from other echinoderms. They have elongated, soft, and muscular bodies, having lost the rigid endoskeleton. Instead, they have microscopic ossicles scattered throughout their leathery skin. They lie on their side, giving them a secondary bilateral symmetry, though their internal organs still follow the rule of 5. Sea cucumbers are detritivores, using modified tube feet around their mouths as feeding tentacles to sift through sand. When threatened, they have a fascinating defense mechanism where they can expel their internal organs out of their anus to distract predators, later regenerating them completely. The final class is Crinoidea, which includes the sea lilies and feather stars. This represents the most ancient and primitive group of living echinoderms. Unlike the other classes that roam the ocean floor, crinoids are often attached to the substrate by a stalk, at least during their juvenile stages. Their mouth and anus are both located on the upper surface, facing away from the seafloor, which is a unique orientation among echinoderms. They are suspension feeders, using their feathery, branching arms covered in sticky tube feet to catch plankton drifting in the water currents. This upward-facing posture is perfectly adapted for a stationary life. We have covered the full spectrum of this incredible phylum. Let us reinforce the most important ideas. First, echinoderms are defined by their unique pentaradial symmetry and their spiny calcareous endoskeleton. Second, their survival is driven by the water vascular system, a brilliant hydraulic network that powers their movement and hunting without the need for a complex muscular system. Finally, we saw how this single evolutionary blueprint is adapted across 5 distinct classes, from the hydraulic pulling power of a sea star to the venomous spines of a sea urchin. You now have a profound appreciation for the diversity and engineering of invertebrate life. Excellent work today.